I'm Nick Parish, 42, and for 15 years, I believed I was a happily married, respected, if somewhat anonymous, businessman. I lived in the comforting lie that my wife, Elise, truly loved and respected me. That delusion shattered on the 15th floor of Meridian Industries, at her grand office opening. Her boss, Victor Dalton, draped an arm around her, then, with a smirk, suggested I find a sports bar. The laughter that followed, Elise's own amusement, was a trigger. Did I snap? No. In the next 3 minutes, I fired Victor, announced Elise's position was eliminated, and revealed I owned Meridian. All in 3 minutes. Elise stood there, in her expensive red dress, mouth agape, a half-empty champagne flute trembling in her hand, utterly unaware that the man she'd mocked had just demolished her entire world. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. The invitation to my wife's office grand opening sat on my kitchen counter like a small piece of evidence. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering, the works. Elise Parish cordially invites you to celebrate her promotion to Vice President of Operations. Not we invite you, just her. Even on something this formal, she managed to make me feel like an afterthought. The party was on the 15th floor in what used to be a conference room, but had been converted into Elise's new corner office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see half the city spread out below. The place was packed. Elise had invited everyone who mattered in the local business community, plus all her colleagues and friends. She stood near the windows in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, holding court with a circle of admirers. Maybe you'd be more comfortable downstairs. I think there's a sports bar across the street. The group laughed again, louder this time. Elise didn't even try to hide her amusement. Victor's right, honey. Victor looked like he'd been hit with a brick. Now, about that promotion, I continued. Victor, I've been reviewing your performance metrics. Your department has lost money in 7 of the last 8 quarters. Your last 3 strategic initiatives failed to meet their projected outcomes by an average of 40%. It's already paid for. I walked out of the room, leaving behind the kind of chaos that would fuel neighborhood gossip for months. Mrs. Lowry was going to have the time of her life with this story. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like the longest 15 floors of my life. Filing cabinets full of documents, photographs, and printed emails. A corkboard covered with timeline charts and relationship maps that would have made a detective proud. The centerpiece was a large table covered with folders, each one labeled with a different aspect of my investigation into Elise and Victor's affair. Phone records, credit card statements, GPS tracking data from her car, screenshots of text messages from her cloud backup that she'd forgotten I had access to. I wasn't proud of the surveillance, but I wasn't ashamed of it either. She thinks this is some kind of temporary insanity that we can work through with counseling and a heartfelt apology. Maybe it is. I looked around the basement at the months of careful documentation and strategic planning that had led to tonight's confrontation. No, Sam, this isn't temporary insanity. This is permanent clarity. What's inappropriate is having an affair with your boss and then lying about it for 4 months. What's inappropriate is using me as your backup plan while you figure out whether Victor is actually going to leave his wife. What's inappropriate is mocking your husband at a company party in front of 50 people who think you're some kind of power couple. She picked up one of the folders and flipped through it, her face getting paler with each page. Where did you get these text messages from? What's it going to take to fix this? You can't fix this, Elise. Some things once they're broken can't be repaired. They can only be replaced with what? With consequences. More importantly, she had a network of friends, neighbors, and acquaintances that reached into every corner of the local business and social community. I probably shouldn't say this, I said, but the whole situation has been building for months. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way she started dressing differently. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Oh, honey, you weren't imagining anything. This is a husband who finally got tired of being lied to. Oh my God, Nick. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Neither did I until I started paying attention. But the simplified version of the story was more dramatic, and drama was what people remembered. By lunchtime, I'd received 3 phone calls from other business owners who wanted to discuss potential partnerships, 2 invitations to social events I'd never been invited to before, and a request for an interview from the business reporter at the local newspaper. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Heard, you're the talk of the town. How's it feel to be famous?" I texted back like the opening act of a much longer show. "Can you meet me somewhere?" "Where are you thinking?" "Romano's 7 o'clock. Romano's was the restaurant where Mrs. Lowry had seen them together. "Why are you embarrassed to be seen with me? Or are you embarrassed to have people know what you've been doing?" "I'm embarrassed to be having this conversation in public." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to have a public affair." The waiter appeared and asked if we wanted to order drinks. The waiter brought our drinks. Elise took a large sip of wine before continuing. "So, what happens now? Do we get divorced? Do you keep destroying everyone who was involved in this?" I arrived early, overhearing talk about last week's drama at Meridian Industries. Someone said, "I heard Parish spent $2 million just to fire one guy." Another person replied, "Maybe both, but you've got to admire the commitment." When Victor arrived, people treated him politely, but distantly, like someone accused of a crime. He walked over to me with a strained smile. "Nick," he said. "I didn't expect to see you here." Watching me struggle. Gloating about what happened at Meridian. "I'm just playing golf with a guy who used to work for me until I found out he was incompetent." "Incompetent?" "I built that department from nothing. What more do you want?" "I want him to understand that there are consequences for his choices. The same consequences I want you to understand." "I already understand. I lost my job, too." "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should ignore him." "But Nick, I also think you should consider whether this has gone far enough." "You've made your point. Victor's career is effectively over, and Elise has learned that actions have consequences. 6 months ago, I'd been a successful but anonymous businessman with a wife I thought I could trust and a future I thought I understood. Now I was someone else entirely, a man who discovered that revenge could be more satisfying than forgiveness and more effective than justice. Victor's car pulled into the site at exactly 9 o'clock. He got out slowly, looking around nervously as he walked toward my truck. "You wanted to talk," he said when I rolled down the window. "Your wounded pride. This is about justice. You and Elise thought you could treat me like a fool and get away with it. You thought I'd never figure out what was happening, or that if I did, I'd be too weak to do anything about it. So, you destroyed both our careers and made us social outcasts. Somewhere far enough away that I never have to see you again or hear your name in a business conversation. You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You have 2 weeks to put your house on the market and find a job in another city. If you're still here after that, I'll make sure the rest of your life is as miserable as the past month has been. But that's a conversation for another day." "When?" "When I decide I'm finished with the current conversation." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know who you are anymore. I came here as the joke. I left as the punchline. Funny how that works. I'm Nick Parish, and I've spent the last 15 years building something from nothing. Started with a small construction company, reinvested every penny, bought failing businesses, turned them around. Now I own a holding company that most people in this Midwestern city have never heard of. That's exactly how I like it. Let them think I'm just some guy who got lucky marrying up." Victor Dalton worked the room like a politician, all handshakes and back slapping. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of guy who'd never had to work for anything in his life, but somehow convinced everyone around him that he was a self-made success story. I grabbed a drink from the bar and found a spot near the wall where I could watch the show. "Mrs. You should go home. This is no place for children." That got the biggest laugh yet. I smiled and took a sip of my drink, letting the moment stretch out until the laughter died down and everyone was looking at me expectantly. "You know what, Victor? And according to the expense reports I've been reviewing, you've been charging personal dinners with my wife to your corporate account." Victor started to say something, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. Elise, congratulations on your new position. Unfortunately, it's been eliminated as part of our corporate restructuring. Not because I was having second thoughts, but because I was finally allowing myself to feel the satisfaction I'd been holding back for months." The look on Victor's face alone had been worth every penny I'd spent acquiring Meridian Industries. My phone rang before I reached my car. "Elise, Nick, we need to talk. This is insane. When your wife starts coming home at midnight claiming she was working late and her phone suddenly requires a password after 15 years of marriage, you either ignore the obvious or you start paying attention to details." The details told a story that was both completely predictable and somehow still shocking in its casual cruelty. Elise and Victor had been having an affair for 4 months. Not just a physical affair, but an emotional one that included detailed discussions about how boring and unsuccessful I was, how much they looked forward to being together once Elise figured out how to handle the Nick situation, and elaborate fantasies about the life they'd build together once Victor's next promotion came through. What made it worse was how ordinary it all was. So, what's next? Phase 2. Victor's going to try to find another job, but that's going to be difficult once word gets around about why he was fired. Elise is going to try to rebuild her reputation, but she's about to discover that being associated with a workplace scandal has consequences that extend beyond just losing your current position. You sound like you're planning a military campaign. Your phone. The same cloud backup account you've been using for 3 years. You never changed the password. That's illegal. It's our shared family account. Real ones. The kind that make you understand that actions have prices that sometimes you can't afford to pay. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if this was negotiable, if there was some combination of tears and promises and strategic concessions that would get her back to where she was this morning. "I'm going to stay at Jennifer's tonight," she finally said. "We can talk about this tomorrow when you've had time to calm down. I saw them together at Romano's last month. They were sitting in a corner booth holding hands across the table like teenagers. I thought about saying something, but you know how awkward these situations can be." "Perfect. Mrs. Look, I know this puts you in an awkward position. Elise is your friend and she needs support right now. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm just asking you to keep in mind that there are 2 sides to this story." Of course. That afternoon, I drove past Victor's apartment complex. His BMW was parked in the visitors section instead of his assigned space, which suggested he was having car trouble. I smiled, remembering the sugar I'd poured into his gas tank after following him home from a late dinner with Elise last week. Victor lived in one of those luxury apartment complexes that was designed to impress people who couldn't afford to buy houses yet. All glass and steel and expensive landscaping with amenities that sounded better in the marketing brochures than they actually were in real life. Either Elise was completely oblivious to the symbolism or she was deliberately trying to provoke me. "I'll be there. And Nick, come alone. This needs to be just the 2 of us." I arrived at Romano's 15 minutes early and asked for a table in the main dining room where we'd be visible to other customers. Elise asked for wine. I ordered coffee. "Look," she said after the waiter left. "I know I handled this badly. I should have talked to you about how I was feeling instead of getting involved with Victor. Do you spend the rest of your life planning elaborate revenge schemes? I haven't decided yet, but I can tell you what's not going to happen. We're not going back to the way things were. We're not going to pretend this never happened, and we're not going to have some tearful reconciliation where you promise to be a better wife and I promise to be a more attentive husband. Then what's the point of all this? I thought it was time to start participating in community events. Good for you. Listen, about last week, I hope there are no hard feelings. None at all. I smiled. Firing you was one of my best decisions. You inherited a profitable department and took credit for others' work. The 30% revenue increase came from contracts negotiated before you arrived. That's not true. It is. I have the documentation. Remember, I'm staying with friends because I can't afford my own place anymore. My career is over. What else do you need to happen before you're satisfied? I'll let you know when I figure that out. This isn't justice, Nick. Maybe it's time to focus on rebuilding your own life instead of continuing to tear down theirs. Janine was probably right, but I wasn't ready to stop yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. One final confrontation that would close the circle and give me the closure I'd been seeking. I called Victor directly. So talk. Get in. I'm fine where I am. Get in the truck, Victor, or this conversation is over before it starts. He hesitated, then walked around to the passenger side and climbed in. Congratulations. You've proven you're not weak. You're just vindictive. Maybe, but I'm vindictive and successful while you're unemployed and unemployable. I'd rather be vindictive than pathetic. You can't force me to leave. I can make staying so unpleasant that leaving becomes your best option. He stared at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. You really are a different person than I thought you were. No, Victor. Then we're even. I haven't known who you were for months. I hung up and drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past the houses where normal couples were probably having normal conversations about normal problems. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent months planning the perfect revenge, and now that I was close to achieving it, I felt empty rather than satisfied. My phone buzzed. Sam, my best friend since high school and the only person who knows exactly how much I'm worth. You really going to this thing tonight? Sam asked without preamble. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, stirring my coffee. Laurie from my neighborhood was there somehow. She had a talent for getting invited to everything, probably because she knew more gossip than a tabloid reporter. Nick. Elise spotted me and waved me over. Everyone, this is my husband, Nick. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't want to lower the average IQ in here. A few people chuckled, but Victor's smile sharpened. That's the spirit. Good to see you can take a joke. Budget cuts, you understand. Nothing personal. I turned back to Victor. As for you, your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out in 5 minutes. You can't just destroy my career because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I'm not destroying your career, Elise. I'm just removing the artificial support structure that was propping it up. If you're as talented as you think you are, I'm sure you'll land on your feet. This is about Victor, isn't it? They weren't star-crossed lovers caught up in some grand passion. They were just two selfish people who'd convinced themselves they deserved better than what they had and who were too cowardly to end their existing relationships before starting a new one. I opened the folder labeled Financial Analysis and spread Victor's employment history across the table. The pattern was always the same. He'd join a company, spend 6 months learning the systems and building relationships, then start taking credit for other people's work while positioning himself for the next promotion. I am. The difference is that in this war, the enemy doesn't know they're under attack until it's too late to defend themselves. After Sam hung up, I spent another hour reviewing my files and updating my timeline. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight had been about establishing dominance and making a statement. Elise, I pay for the service. Legally, I have as much right to access it as you do. She threw the folder back on the table. So what now? You've humiliated me in public, destroyed my career, and apparently you've been building some kind of shrine to your paranoia in our basement. That's probably a good idea, but at least tomorrow we're not going to be talking about fixing this. We're going to be talking about what comes next. She climbed the stairs without looking back and I heard her moving around upstairs packing a bag. The front door closed 20 minutes later and I was alone with my war room and my plans for Phase 2. I opened the folder labeled Social Consequences and began making phone calls. Lowry had seen them together in public, which meant other people had too. By tomorrow morning, everyone in our social circle would know that the dramatic confrontation at the party was the culmination of a very public affair. I appreciate you telling me that, Mrs. Lowry. It helps to know I wasn't going crazy. And Nick, for what it's worth, I always thought you deserved better than the way she's been treating you lately. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Jennifer had noticed changes in Elise's behavior, which meant other people had, too. By the time Elise tried to rebuild her social connections, she'd discover that her friends had been quietly questioning her choices for months. The next morning, I drove downtown to have breakfast at Murphy's Diner, a place where local business people gathered to drink coffee and exchange gossip before starting their workday. I parked across the street and called the main number for Meridian Industries. When the receptionist answered, I asked to speak with Victor Dalton. I'm sorry, Mr. Dalton is no longer with the company. Can someone else help you? If Elise wanted to have a public conversation, I was going to make sure it was as public as possible. She walked in exactly at 7 wearing a black dress that was probably supposed to convey seriousness and regret. She looked around the restaurant nervously before sitting down across from me. Thank you for coming. But that doesn't justify what you're doing now. What exactly am I doing? You're trying to destroy us. Not just end our relationship, but actually ruin our lives. That's not justice, Nick. The point is that you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything you thought was important, just like I did when I found out my wife was having an affair with her boss and making jokes about me behind my back. She finished her wine and signaled the waiter for another glass. You know what's funny? Victor was right about you. What did he say? Meridian's productivity has improved significantly. His smile faltered. I'm sure whoever replaces me will do fine. We're not replacing you. We're eliminating your position entirely. Want me to share it? Victor realized the crowd was listening. You're a vindictive little man, he said, storming off the course. Victor's always had trouble handling pressure, Tom remarked. After the round, we went to the bar for the reception. This is cruelty, maybe. But it's the kind of cruelty that makes sure other people think twice before they make the same choices you and Victor made. She hung up without saying goodbye. I ordered another drink and spent the rest of the evening accepting congratulations from people who seemed to think I'd won some kind of victory. Maybe I had, but the war wasn't over yet. We need to talk, I said when he answered. I have nothing to say to you. That's fine. You can listen. Meet me at the construction site on Maple Street tonight at 9 o'clock. Up close, he looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. His hair was unkempt. His clothes were wrinkled. And he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who wasn't sleeping well. You look terrible, I said. He turned to look at me directly for the first time since getting in the truck. What do you want from me, Nick? An apology? An admission that you're smarter than I thought you were. What's it going to take to end this? I'm exactly the same person I always was. You just never bothered to pay attention. He opened the passenger door and got out without saying anything else. I watched him walk back to his car and drive away, then sat in the empty construction site for another hour, thinking about what came next. My phone rang. But emptiness was better than humiliation, and control was better than being controlled. Victor's house went on the market the following week. By the end of the month, he and his family had moved to Phoenix, where he'd found a job with a small consulting firm that apparently hadn't heard about his reputation problems. Elise filed for divorce 2 weeks later. We settled out of court with her receiving enough money to start over somewhere else and me keeping the house, the business, and most of our shared assets. Got to support my loving wife in her moment of triumph. That tone tells me you know something she doesn't. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Either way, it should be entertaining. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. He's in. What is it you do again, honey? Something with construction. The group laughed politely. I could feel the condescension rolling off them in waves. Oh, I love jokes, especially the really elaborate ones that take months to set up. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Janine, it's Nick. Yes, I'm at the party. Go ahead and file those papers we discussed tonight. Don't bother cleaning out your office. We'll mail you whatever personal items we find. The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. Then the whispers started. Elise's friends began backing away from her like she had something contagious. You think something's going on between us? I don't think anything, Elise. I know exactly what's been going on between you two. The question is whether you're going to keep lying about it or if you're ready to have an honest conversation for the first time in months. She was quiet for a long moment. When the inevitable problems arose from his incompetence, he'd already be interviewing elsewhere, leaving his colleagues to clean up the mess. At Meridian Industries, he'd been following the same playbook. The strategic initiatives he'd been bragging about to Elise were actually developed by his subordinates. The cost savings he'd claimed credit for were the result of budget cuts that had been mandated by the board of directors. The new client relationships he'd supposedly built were actually referrals from existing accounts. The next phase would be about systematic destruction of everything Victor and Elise had built together, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the ruins of their betrayal. I heard Elise's car in the driveway around 11:30. She came through the front door like she was walking into a minefield, calling my name softly as if she was afraid of waking someone up. I'm down here, I called back. Her footsteps on the basement stairs sounded hesitant, uncertain. What's your endgame here? My endgame is justice. You and Victor thought you could treat me like some kind of fool who'd never figure out what was going on. You made jokes about me, planned your future together, and assumed I'd just quietly accept whatever scraps of attention you felt like throwing my way. That's not what happened. Mrs. Lowry answered her phone on the second ring, which told me she'd been waiting for this call since she left the party. Nick. Oh my goodness. I still can't believe what happened tonight. What are you going to do now? I honestly don't know. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward. After I hung up, I called Jennifer Martinez, Elise's closest friend and the person she'd be staying with tonight. Jennifer was a real estate agent with her own networking connections and a tendency to share personal information when she'd had a few glasses of wine. I'd been going there for years, but usually I just grabbed coffee to go. Today, I planned to stay and listen. The conversation at the counter was exactly what I'd expected. Word of last night's party had already spread through the business community, and everyone had an opinion about what had happened. I heard Parish bought Meridian just to fire his wife's boss, someone was saying. Oh, I didn't realize he'd left. Do you have a forwarding number where I can reach him? I'm not authorized to give out personal information, but if you'd like to leave a message, I can try to get it to him. That's okay. I'll try to reach him another way. I hung up and smiled. What did you want to talk about? I want to know what it's going to take to end this. You've made your point. You've humiliated Victor and me in front of everyone we know. You've cost both of us our jobs. That's revenge. You're right. It is revenge. And you know what? It feels pretty good. She stared at me like I just admitted to enjoying torture. He said you were the kind of man who'd rather destroy something than lose it. He said, you'd never just walk away and let people be happy. Victor said a lot of things. Most of them turned out to be lies. Not this time. She was probably right. Most of what you did wasn't necessary. His face drained, but he smiled weakly. I should find my partners. Good luck today. You, too, Victor. Victor was gone, likely explaining his meltdown to his wife. The conversation revolved around Victor's outburst. By the end of the evening, he'd gone from respected executive to the guy who had a public meltdown at a charity event. I got a text from Elise. Heard about what happened at the tournament. 3 weeks after the golf tournament, I received a call from my lawyer, Janine. Victor had hired an attorney and was threatening to sue me for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He doesn't have a case, Janine explained. But he's desperate enough to try anything. His lawyer is claiming you've been systematically destroying his reputation and interfering with his ability to find new employment. Come alone. I'm not meeting you anywhere. If you want to talk, we can do it through our lawyers. Victor, you have 2 choices. You can meet me tonight and hear what I have to say, or you can wake up tomorrow morning and discover that the documentation of your affair with my wife has been sent to your wife, your children, and every business contact in your phone. Thanks. That's really what I needed to hear tonight. When's the last time you had a job interview? What's it to you? I'm curious. I want you to understand something. I want you to understand that the man you and Elise thought you were dealing with never actually existed. The trusting husband, the naive businessman, the guy who could be manipulated and discarded when he became inconvenient. That person was a role I was playing because I thought it was what marriage required. And now you know who I really am. Elise, Victor called me. He said you threatened him. I made him an offer. You told him to leave town or you'd destroy the rest of his life. That's about right. The last time I saw her, she was loading boxes into a moving truck. Any regrets? She asked. About what? About any of it? The revenge, the destruction, the way this all ended? I thought about it for a moment. No regrets. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The truth was, I'd been watching Elise for months. The late nights, the new wardrobe, the way she'd started talking about her boss, Victor Dalton, like he was some kind of business genius. Victor Dalton, who couldn't run a lemonade stand without bankrupting it, but had the kind of smooth confidence that impressed people who didn't look too closely at the numbers. I'd done my homework on Victor. These were Elise's people now, ambitious corporate climbers who measured success by job titles and office square footage. I dabble in various industries, I said. Nothing as impressive as what Elise does here. Victor appeared at Elise's shoulder, sliding his arm around her waist in a gesture that was supposed to look casual, but lasted about 3 seconds too long. Nick, right? I hung up and looked around the room. Everyone was staring at me now, confused by the sudden shift in tone. You know what's funny about corporate acquisitions? I said loud enough for the whole room to hear. Sometimes the new owner likes to attend the company parties, get a feel for the corporate culture. Victor stood frozen, apparently unable to process what had just happened. This is impossible. Elise finally managed. You can't just, you don't have that kind of money. Apparently, I do. Where are you going home? If you want to talk, you know where to find me. I hung up and drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past the houses where normal couples were probably settling in for a normal evening together. The irony wasn't lost on me. I just pulled off the most satisfying moment of my adult life, and I had nobody to share it with. But Victor had made one crucial mistake this time. He'd gotten personally involved with an employee and he'd used company resources to support the relationship. The expensive dinners, the weekend trips disguised as business conferences, the flowers sent to Elise's office, it was all documented in corporate expense reports that painted a clear picture of misconduct. More importantly, Victor had been making promises to Elise about her career advancement that he had no authority to deliver on. The promotion to vice president of operations was supposed to happen after Victor became the new general manager, a position that required board approval and was never going to be offered to someone with his track record. When she reached the bottom and saw the war room for the first time, she stopped completely. What is all this? This is what happens when your husband has too much time on his hands and a talent for research. She walked slowly around the table, looking at the folders and documents. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally anger. That's exactly what happened. I have it all documented, Elise. Every text message, every phone call, every expense report. You want to know what's really sick? It's not that you had an affair. Is Elise okay? She's staying with Jennifer tonight. I think she needs some time to process everything. Well, of course she does. Poor thing. Nick, is everything okay? Elise just showed up here in tears. I'm sure she told you what happened at the party tonight. She said you had some kind of breakdown and fired her boss in front of everyone. She's saying you've been acting paranoid and jealous for weeks. Must have cost him millions. That's what happens when you mess with a man's family, another voice replied. Dalton should have known better. I always wondered how Parish could afford that house in Riverside Heights on a contractor's salary. Turns out he's been hiding his money all along. Victor's termination had been processed quickly and professionally, which meant he'd already been escorted out of the building and his access to company resources had been revoked. He was probably sitting in his apartment right now, trying to figure out how to explain his sudden unemployment to his wife and wondering whether any of his professional contacts would return his calls. The next phase of my plan required patience and careful timing. Victor would spend the next few days in denial, assuming he could find another position quickly and get his life back on track. Elise would spend the same period trying to convince herself that this was all a temporary setback that could be overcome with the right strategy. What else do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Fine, I understand. I made a mistake and now I'm paying for it. But this has gone far enough, Nick. That's not the man I married. The man you married was a fool who trusted his wife and assumed she'd treat him with the same respect he showed her. That man is gone, Elise. You eliminated him when you decided I was worth less than whatever Victor was offering you. Victor isn't offering me anything anymore. But I didn't care anymore. The man who would have walked away and tried to rebuild his life somewhere else had disappeared the night I found their text messages. What was left was someone who understood that sometimes the only way to move forward was to make sure the people who had hurt you couldn't hurt anyone else the same way. I'm going to Jennifer's, Elise said, standing up. When you're ready to have a rational conversation about how to end this marriage without destroying each other, call me. I have a feeling you're going to need it. I was paired with 3 business owners, including Tom Bradley, who owned the region's largest construction supply company. We spent the front 9, discussing business, and by the 10th hole, Tom had offered me a partnership. Meanwhile, Victor struggled. His charm wasn't working and his game was falling apart. This has to stop. I texted back. Just played golf. Not my fault. Victor can't handle losing. Have I been doing that? Probably. But you've been smart about it. Everything you've done has been either completely legal or impossible to prove in court. The golf tournament incident was a public conversation between 2 adults. Your choice. He was quiet for a long moment. You're bluffing. Try me. 9 o'clock, I've been hearing from people in the industry that your name keeps coming up in conversations, but not in a good way. You've been sabotaging me. I haven't had to sabotage you, Victor. Your reputation has been sabotaging itself. All I've done is make sure people know the truth about who you really are. I'm someone who pays attention to details. Someone who plans ahead. Someone who understands that the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting even. You've gotten even, Nick. Nick, this has gone too far. You've become someone I don't recognize. Good. The person you recognized was someone you thought you could cheat on and humiliate without consequences. I prefer being someone you don't recognize. I have one. What's that? I regret that I never got to know the real you until it was too late. She drove away that afternoon and I never saw her again. But sometimes late at night in my empty house. Princeton MBA, family connections, 3 previous companies, where he'd managed to take credit for other people's work before moving on just ahead of the inevitable collapse. Now, he was running operations at Meridian Industries, a mid-sized consulting firm that had been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. What Elise didn't know was that my holding company had just acquired a controlling interest in Meridian Industries. What Victor didn't know was that his new promotion strategy was about to backfire spectacularly. I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one Elise always said made me look like a funeral director, and drove downtown to the Meridian building. Elise has told me so much about you. Construction, wasn't it? Among other things. Well, this is probably all pretty boring for you. Corporate strategy, market positioning, that sort of thing. Victor's face went pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that as of 5 o'clock this afternoon, Parish Holdings owns 62% of Meridian Industries, which makes me your boss, Victor, and yours, too, honey. The room went completely quiet. Elise's mouth fell open. Funny how you never bother to ask what I actually did for a living. You just assumed I was some small-time contractor who got lucky marrying you. I finished my drink and set the glass down on the nearest table. Enjoy the rest of your party, everyone. The bar's still open for another hour. My basement used to be Elise's least favorite part of the house. It's like a bunker down there, she'd complain whenever I spent too much time working on my computer or reviewing business documents. She had no idea how accurate that description was. I'd spent the last 6 months turning the basement into what Sam jokingly called my war room. 3 monitors connected to a desktop computer that could have run NASA's mission control. My phone rang. Sam, how'd it go tonight? Better than I expected. Victor's face when I fired him was worth the price of admission. And Elise still in denial. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention to you. There's a difference. This is sick, Nick. This is obsessive and paranoid and completely inappropriate. It's that you enjoyed humiliating me while you were having it. She sat down in the chair across from me, suddenly looking exhausted. So, what do you want? An apology? A promise that it won't happen again? Though, I have to say, I always wondered about that Victor Dalton. There was something about him that didn't sit right with me. Too smooth, you know, like a used car salesman in an expensive suit. Mrs. Lowry had a gift for gathering and distributing information that would have impressed intelligence agencies. Did she mention that she's been having an affair with Victor Dalton for the last 4 months? Silence on the other end of the line. Jennifer, she said you were making accusations, but I have documentation. Jennifer, text messages, phone records, credit card statements. This isn't paranoid jealousy. I sat at a table in the corner eating scrambled eggs and listening to my reputation transform in real time. By the end of the week, I'd gone from being Elise's husband who does something with construction to being that guy who bought a whole company just to get revenge on his wife's lover. The truth was more complicated, of course. I'd been looking for investment opportunities in the consulting sector for months, and Meridian Industries had been undervalued due to poor management and declining revenues. Acquiring a controlling interest had been a smart business decision that also happened to give me leverage over Victor and Elise. They were both wrong, but they wouldn't realize it until it was too late to change course. My phone rang. Elise, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. You're destroying people's lives over something that doesn't have to be permanent. Something that doesn't have to be permanent. You mean your affair with Victor? She looked around nervously, aware that other diners might be listening. Can you keep your voice down? It's over between us. Because he got fired or because you finally realized he was using you? Because I realized I made a terrible mistake. No, you realized you got caught. There's a difference. I'll keep that in mind. She left money on the table for her wine and walked out without looking back. I finished my coffee and drove home, already planning Phase 3. The Riverside Country Club's charity golf tournament was the perfect place for reputations to be made or destroyed. Victor was there using it to network with potential clients who were part of my investment network. At the 16th, Victor's ball landed in a sand trap, and after multiple swings, he was visibly frustrated. Having trouble concentrating? I asked. Just an off day. Seems to be happening a lot lately. He missed his putt by 3 feet. You're enjoying this a little too much. Enjoying what? She called immediately. You're destroying him, Nick. And for what? He's already lost his job. His reputation is ruined. The business networking is just normal professional activity. Even the acquisition of Meridian Industries was a legitimate business transaction. So, what does he want? Money. He's hoping you'll pay him to go away and stop making noise about harassment. 9 o'clock, the construction site was one of my company's projects, a small office building that was about 60% complete. The skeleton of the structure was finished, but the walls and interior work were still in progress. It was isolated enough for a private conversation, but public enough that Victor wouldn't feel like he was walking into an ambush. I arrived early and waited in my truck, watching the empty street and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. And who am I according to you? You're a fraud. You're someone who spent his entire career taking credit for other people's work and moving on before anyone figures out that you don't actually know what you're doing. You're a man who seduces other men's wives and makes promises you can't keep because you're too arrogant to admit you don't have as much power as you pretend to have. Is that what this is about? You've destroyed my career, ruined my reputation, and made it impossible for me to find work in this industry. What more do you want? I want you to leave town. What? I want you to pack up your family and move somewhere else. What about us? What about our marriage? What about it? Are we getting divorced? Probably. I wondered if she was right. Maybe the person I'd become during those months of planning and executing my revenge wasn't the real me. Maybe it was just another role I'd learned to play. But if it was a role, it was one that had served me well. And in a world where people like Victor and Elise thought they could use and discard other people without consequences, maybe being someone they didn't recognize was exactly what the situation required.